It's recording right now. I'm gonna, when this is over, I'm gonna download it to my cloud. All right. So it'll be, it's gonna come to you, to your email. Send it to me and I will upload it to my cloud.
Okay.
For those of you who have signed in, also Malia has put in a message for those who have just joined to let her know what your email is so that we can make sure we get your attendance to this training, especially if you are wanting to get clock hours. So I'm going to have Malia is the one that's going to be watching for messages in the chat. And so then I can answer questions along the way if you have them. Oops. So if we can get everybody to mute their mic, that would be great.
A different setup than last time.
It
I'm on the screen now. I don't.
all right. Is we've got, actually you, Malia, need to mute yourself. But everybody else is muted.
I am muted.
All right. Okay. So, whoops. All right, so we're going to be talking about universal design for learning today. Universal design for learning is a way of providing teaching methods, basically to remove barriers to learning. And it is a front-loaded theory and concept that I'll show you how it came about and why it's important and why the state of Washington is now putting efforts and resources into this through the Washington legislature, which on the first part of this process provided $35 million to OSPI to start this process of putting or practicing of UDL practices, universal design for learning in school districts, starting with administration, and then be able to go to the school level, the principal building, so that instead of a teacher trying to go in with a thought and a theory and trying to change the system on the top up, bottom up, the process is going from the top down. So if you haven't come across yet the idea or the concept of universal design for learning here in Washington State, stay tuned because it is going to be something that you will benefit from and your students will as well. If I can get this to me. All right. It's always kind of that. So universal design for learning, the background is it basically started with just the Americans with Disability Act. And it's basically evolved out of the disability rights movement in the 70s, which we know that President Lyndon Johnson signed that piece of the policy and actions that help prevent discrimination against people with individuals with disability. With signing of the Rehabilitation Act in 1973, designers in the Rehabilitation Act decided to look at how are we going to help people access physical environments. And so that all started with when you start seeing curb cuts, when you start seeing things that help people, especially with mobility issues, being able to access buildings. Ron Mace, who is the architect of universal design, who also happens to be a person who uses a wheelchair, is where the genesis came from. The term universal design came to represent the design of products and environments that are accessible to all individuals regardless of ability, age, or other potential limiting factors. And then for looking at students, the physical access marked a critical step to inclusive learning. Inclusive learning experiences, but presence alone, we know, does not ensure that there's going to be equal access to curriculum. Hence, that is where universal design for learning really spawned, per se. So the evolution of educational inclusion, I want to show you a YouTube video from, her name is, if you haven't seen her, it's 5 More Minutes, and Moore is spelled Moore. And her name is Shelley Moore, and she will do her introduction here on this YouTube video. And I will get that hopefully started for you. Oops, I didn't want that thing.
Edge. That's a video.
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Can you copy?
The thing that's different about a verbal vacation home, you always have the whole place to yourself.
Welcome to
All right, so I apparently make sure that I have the speaker is on. And make sure I'm doing this correctly. We'll have her pick twice.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelley Moore. Today's topic is the evolution of inclusion.
Hold on a second, I'm looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, so you remember the dots? I know. I've shown you these before. But one colleague of mine suggested to me once, he goes, what if we didn't look at these as different concepts that we compare to each other, but instead as an evolution of time? It was totally brilliant. Now we could look at this timeline through the lens of any marginalized population, but to understand this timeline from the inclusion and disability perspective, we have to go back in time a little bit. Many of us know or are connected to someone who experienced institutionalization. It was even recommended to families by doctors. Although British Columbia was the first province in Canada to close down their institutions, there are still individuals living in these conditions across Canada today. The institutionalization movement is an example of exclusion. It separated individuals with disabilities from their families without choice. But the disability rights movement over the past 50 years, with the hard work of some incredible self-advocates and families, and maybe a little help from Geraldo Rivera.
You know what, I do not believe I have this shared, so I need to use the share this.
Oh, yeah,
All
I'm not
good.
watching, I can't see it online. There we go.
All right. So let's, we haven't mixed a whole lot, so we're gonna go ahead.
Pushed communities to shift so that individuals of all abilities were welcomed and living in the same settings as their family and friends. This shift from institutions to communities, this was the start of the inclusive evolution. We have movement, but can we do better? Although many individuals are no longer excluded from their families and communities, they were, and let's be honest, they still are, expected to attend segregated schools or self-contained special education programs that are totally separate from the rest of the school community. And so parents started to ask some very good questions. You see, children with disabilities have siblings without disabilities, and families wanted all their kids to have equitable access to community-based education together. Kids started to be integrated into classrooms with their peers. They're in math together. They're in gym class together. They're eating lunch together. Kids are together. This is better. The shift from segregated to integrated schools and classrooms, this is the next step in the evolution of inclusion. We have movement, but can we do better? Well, this is where things get tricky, because integration, it doesn't take long to realize that just being together, it's not enough. Although in the same classroom, students with disabilities are often just that. They're physically in the classroom. They may sometimes have parallel activities, but mostly it's loosely connected classroom tasks. Now, you don't need me to tell you that just physically sharing space and time is enough to make you feel like you belong in a community. I mean, come on, there are Disney movies made about this. Breathing the same air is not enough. Do you remember the Titans? I do. The evolution from integration to inclusion is now the topic of many conversations in communities and schools around the world. How do we support individuals to be meaningfully included and not just physically integrated? It's not just about where kids go in their day, but why. What is the purpose to the places that they go? It's now school-based teams and staff that are asking questions about how to do this. How can we support purposeful and meaningful placements for kids with disabilities? In inclusive classrooms and schools, students aren't just present, but they have roles and responsibilities in their classrooms and also meaningfully connecting to their peers. This is inclusion. So there you have it, my friends. A brief history of inclusion in about 5 minutes. If this is interesting to you, though, definitely investigate your local history as well, because every community is in a different place in this journey, and it's so valuable to know where we've come from. The other thing, though, is looking at these visuals as a timeline. It really helped me to shift my own thinking from which bubble am I at or not at, and shift to more about where are we now in our inclusive journey and what's our next step. All of a sudden, the goal of inclusion becomes action-oriented and just feels so much more possible. We may not all be at the same place in the journey, but we can all move forward. We can do better. And so this is the question I'm going to leave you with today. Can we still do better? Do you think there's another evolution in inclusion? What might that be? How can we inch even more forward to make inclusion even better? Thanks, Geraldo.
I appreciate her humor. Yes.
May I ask why she's saying things for Aldo?
Oh, there was because he's a reporter, and he's like a special investigation reporter, and he did an article on this at one time, many years ago.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why she always gives that kind of like, hey, Geraldo. So that's the reason for that. All right. Let's go back here. Hopefully everybody can see. So a little bit about universal design for learning. Just taking from what Shelley had said, this has been a process. The background that we started as universal design of just having access to a room or to a building, such as what Shelley was saying, that just because we have people in the same room does not mean we have inclusion. It just means they have access to the same environment. And for educators, curriculum developers, researchers, and parents, UDL offers a framework for transmitting information and delivery of instruction and assessment in a way that resonates with all learners in a proactive way rather than a reactive retrofitting way, which it is now. So equality, that this is what universal design does. It is the assumption that everyone benefits from the same support, that we all have equal access to an environment. The first picture, does that look like equality? No. The second picture, everyone gets the supports they need. This is a concept of affirmative action, thus producing equity. So is this that we put retrofitting supports and modifications in place? That's an evolution. That's a good thing, but does it really meet the needs of everyone? No, it has to be retrofitted. So we go to the third, where it says all three can see the game without supports, accommodations, because the cause of the inequity was addressed first. The system barrier has been removed. So instead of just building a fence and then saying, oh, wait, we better put boxes on it so people can look. What they did is, how can we have access that everyone can participate in, rather than retrofitting and accommodating and modifying environments and curriculum? They think about that, instructors think about that first and foremost. It's kind of like the blueberry muffin analogy. Just because you've stacked blueberries on a muffin, does that make it a blueberry muffin? Well, no, that's the same thing as retrofitting of instruction or stacking accommodations to instruct doesn't make it equitable, accessible, and inclusive classroom. We start with the learner in mind at the front end, rather than retrofitting a learner into an environment and curriculum. How do we open it up so everyone can have access to it? So address what are the barriers to that learner? What are the barriers? How does this person, we, have gone to IEP meetings and it's like, we're talking about the placement of a student. Well, actually what the law states is that we think of all students in general education, and then we're supposed to think about other specialized supports. But in this realm of universal design for learning, it doesn't mean that people aren't going to need supports. It means that we're going to have the opportunity to open a classroom so that more students can participate. And then if there's scaffolding or differentiation of instruction that happens in that environment. And this is all student focused. It's not out of, you can't be in this classroom until you're able to manage your behaviors. It is, what does this student need to be successful in this classroom? What's motivating for this person? Why do they want to be here? It's the evolution of education. It's looking at brain-based teaching, learning styles, using a lot of assistive technology, New Bloom taxonomy, differentiation of instruction, 21st century literacies, I thought it was literacies, cooperative learning, backward design, multiple intelligence, web tools, understanding by design. It's interesting just what I've been really kind of enmeshed in this process of teaching universal design for learning, or at least the concept. And I have a project that is, how do we move universal design for learning into the workforce? And that is where the next movement is going as well.
What does backward design mean?
Backward design is like, this person needs all these accommodations, and now we're gonna move it backwards. What is it? It's like, here we are now, this is where we wanna be. Now let's see, what are the things that we need to have in place?
Okay.
So that this person can start off with all the things they need to be successful. And like I said, it's looking at a person with a disability is not being broken.
As a person?
That's a person. That it's moving from the concept of a medical model, meaning that people with disabilities are broken, that need to be fixed. That we look at people with disabilities as a natural progression of the human existence, and that we need to have, as a society, take the onus of opening our classrooms, our work environments, that it is accessible to everyone rather than just a few that fit into this box. So it really is thinking a more broader vision of this. And oftentimes we hear that, well, isn't that just differentiation of instruction? It's different. And if you know what differentiation of instruction, you'll see the similarities and the differences between universal design. Looking at the content, it provides options for successful high-quality curriculum. It emphasizes teacher clarity about the learning goal, versus universal design provides options for acquiring comprehension and information is the true principle. So rather than basically having the teacher who's going to provide with the curriculum, and it's going to be great and it's going to be wonderful and it will, universal design says it's great, it's wonderful, and this is how we need to look at the student first. And then there's a process of provides options at the right level of challenge for practicing and applying and generalizing new knowledge, understanding, and skills That's the process as opposed to engagement, which is going to be different in universal design for learning. It provides options that help the learner who tap in actually into learner's interests and provides opportunity, appropriate challenges to increase their engagement. Rather than you need to sit and pay attention, it's how do I get this person engaged? And we're going to get a little more further into this because, you know, some people think, well, this is just kind of woo-woo. And how are we going to get this done? It is being done. It's being done in a lot of school districts. And that's one of the reasons why Washington State is embracing this.
Have any districts in our state started doing this?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
they have.
there are many pilot states, pilot schools.
Awesome.
There isn't any, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. They're just started this year, Kitsap County, I believe it is South Kitsap that has just started with the administration part of it. They haven't gone into any other
Yeah.
part. So it is a tier understanding of what universal design for learning. And let me tell you, this isn't going to be like an overnight process. It is that school districts have to write in to be a pilot that want to be participating in this. And so it is, there are some schools that have been very hesitant. There are some that are just jumping on going, this is the best thing since sliced bread. It all is changing. It is changing a system, a systematic change from us and them to we are and we need to teach together. And that is a whole new paradigm that is really a new experience for a lot of folks.
It's pretty much a complete shift in thinking about the way they teach, right?
It is.
And it just doesn't benefit children with disabilities. It's
No,
everyone,
it
all
is,
kids.
that's it. It
Yeah.
is, it helps everyone. And I'll show an example of that here in just a moment, because you just
This
said
is
it.
amazing, sorry.
No, I'm happy that it's, so differentiation of instruction, and the difference is, you know, the proactive approach that responds to the student's assessment information versus the universal design, a proactive approach that designs flexible goals, methods, materials, and assessments by anticipating the full range of the learner's need from the outset. Rather than this is what I have and we're going to assess you on this based on what we have available, which may not meet the person's learning style and may not even meet the person's access to even the environment, versus we're going to look at this is what we're going to teach. How do we help all of our students access that information? Although it may be very different, how can we do that? That's going to be the difference. And then we also look at a compilation of educational theories and practices related to effective teaching and student achievement. So it's a compilation of things that you can put together for differentiation of instruction. Universal design was inspired by the universal design concept of architecture and product development, and based on the educational research regarding learners' varied response to instruction. So who does better with auditory input from, you know, having an audible book versus somebody who's going to read out of the text? And if you have somebody who's reading out of the text and they have poor comprehension, are they going to be able to meet this curriculum outcome? Most likely not. So how can we accommodate that person to get to that place? And it starts, I mean, there's as much deeper than what I'm just explaining, but it certainly is a process. Differentiation of instruction can be a support as well as scaffolding of skills, but universal design for learning thinks of the student first rather than the curriculum first. So this is the Center for Applied Special Technology. They actually happen to be the organization that I'm working with my project through Thurston County. And we're going through a training process, which is very robust. And I'd like to present this to you so that you can get a really you a clear picture.
All right, so actually,
I know, I'm
oh,
gonna get
okay,
there.
I was,
Don't worry.
I know that you got it, you got this.
I'll get it here. So place it.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
And CAST has just, multiple resources for you to to gain information and for you to have a better understanding of really what does it look like? Because that's what people keep saying. Well, this is great. You've got a theory, but what does that mean? Where's my checklist so I can do this? It's like, it's not a checklist. It's looking at just what the slide before this said, learning styles are as different as the finger, the fingerprint of a person. We all learn differently. Thing is that we've had to learn coping mechanisms and be able to adjust our own learning style. But for some people, say who have an intellectual disability, who have a learning disability, that may have dyslexia, they are basically become marginalized because we don't have access to curriculum. So how do we make sure that information is embedded? It's interesting, like I said, I'm going through this process of learning through CAST, and just, I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, I just want to download what they have and just put it in my brain because it's just rich with good information. It's, that the analogy that it says, why did I learn my fractions? Well, when am I ever going to use that in the rest of my life? Well, think back if we had that opportunity to be able to say, we're going to use, real objects rather than just numbers that may or may not have meaning to people. So it is looking at things differently, and there are going to be a lot of teachers that are much more fluent in this. And matter of fact, there are a lot of teachers that already have a lot of this mindset, but there are others that, just for instance, me standing here, standing and delivering. Although I've got, a printout for you to follow or a PowerPoint, if it was a truly engaging opportunity, one thing I would make sure is that I had closed captioning. There are a lot of things interesting, and actually my grandson helped me this last Tuesday night. I got to go see his water polo game, actually in Gig Harbor. And I had a lot of reading I needed to get done before my class that morning. And I said, Jason, help me figure out how do I get a text to speech to work on my cell phone? And he's like, oh, let me see. And it took him not more than 2 minutes to go, here you go, Grandma. And it literally, I was able to listen to my whole module that I need to listen to on the way home. Actually, three modules. I took my test when I got home, and I was like, holy cow, I wish I had this knowledge. And that is the one thing that, looking at his strengths, but looking at my need, if I had to wait to sit down in front of or print something out, that became a barrier to my learning. So finding or having an opportunity to listen to this on my way while I'm driving, it eliminated that barrier for me to learn. I mean, that's more of a broad example, but it is using technology to help people with that. And so actually on the way up here, I listened to my next module. I got this now.
Multitasking, Mary, multitasking.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that was, I actually took a video of it. I marveled, my son, Michael, who has autism and intellectual disability and a intractable seizure disorder. He loves searching on the internet. He loves YouTube videos. Recently, he has found, it's on Word. I can't remember the program of it. I can't remember. Anyway, he had self-taught himself to cut and paste the picture he wanted onto this program. And then he learned how to cut the face out of a person and move it to the side, and he would put another face into it. Now, I was like, how'd you do that? I mean, this, because his learning style is so different. He's got a very analytical learning style. And I actually learned so much from just watching him because he has the time and the interest in the computer to do that. So it really is, it's tapping into things that are going to eliminate those barriers and tap into what are the interests of an individual.
You can make a business out of that, by the way.
I know it, seriously.
I would pay, I have some wedding pictures I need fixed.
I know, right? Exactly. So UDL is an evidence-based framework. This is all based on neuroscience. This isn't just somebody who's like, oh, look, this is a theory, isn't this great? No, evidence-based framework, and it's all based on neuroscience. And UDL offers the greatest impact when it's used during the design stage. Like I said, the upfront supports of instruction, like, well, now I put this as a job development or community-based instruction, or it could be access to a classroom. It conveys information that any learner can understand. Just like I said, well, anybody can benefit from that. Absolutely. It's like having the curb cuts were originally made for people with wheelchairs to be able to access a building or have safety on a sidewalk. But we have moms using it for their strollers. We have delivery men using to deliver whatever. Even when I walked in the building today, that you have push buttons for opening doors, I've got my hands full. It's like, oh, I'm going to use that. It helped me gain access to a building, and I don't have any physical limitations quite yet, that I was able to enter the building. The other thing that I'm thinking about is texting. How many of you text? I would imagine everybody in this room, including me. I mean, that's one of the most fundamental way that I communicate with my friends and family is through text. Just check it in. If I don't have time to talk, I'm going to just text. That was originally developed for deaf people who needed a way to use a cell phone because they can't hear a phone call, they can certainly text. It was used for the deaf population, and yet that's all, all the generations below us are using to communicate. So it would open up access. And I remember for years, the only way you can get an Audible book was if you went to the School for the Blind and you checked it out from their library. Now you've got Audibles, you've got Amazon, whatever. I mean, there are ways that you can have books read to you. I mean, that's a standard operation mode that we have come to expect, when in just recent years, it was only available to the blind. And it opened up, just with this, an opportunity for many.
Yeah, I didn't know that my kids could listen to books during distance learning on their reading program
Oh,
when they're supposed to be reading them, so that they can be practicing their reading. It's a double-edged sword there.
yeah, right.
We're doing Harry Potter. My daughter refuses to read even though she's very proficient. She just refuses. But I can trick her into reading. I love, thank goodness for Audible.
Well, that's it. That's the barrier. I mean, if we're like, in school saying you have to read, and you have to read, during the summer, you got to read 100 books. That's the best, that's a good, and I'm like, I can't even read that. I mean, I don't want to even.
Yeah.
But if I want to gain information, rather than playing video games or whatever, I could still have, my grandchildren, they can even interact and listen to a book and have education and be engaged. And even if we're listening to it all, we can even have a conversation after that. So there's a lot of value to things that, and I think it was Einstein that said, don't memorize something that you can reference. So think about that. If we have people that are, we do want reading comprehension. If we have people who are pushing away from reading, who don't want to read, what's the barrier? Is it not interesting? Well, we need to find them interesting text so that they will want to read it. Or they're not able to access it because they have reading comprehension difficulties. They have dyslexia. They have, a multitude of other considerations that we put that in place so that we're not trying to, fight with our teenagers to get them to read something when it's like, I need you to listen to this. And they're going to get the same comprehension. Our way of learning and accessing information in this day and age is significantly evolving. I mean, the pandemic kind of threw us into, ultra speed into the electronic mode of distance learning, of, face-to-face conversations, of, with curriculum online, ways to interact even with teachers, parents to teachers, students with teachers. This has all changed dramatically. We're not going backwards. It's got to be moving forward. So here's another 5-minute more that will from Shelley, who
Hey, come take a look at this.
No, I don't want
If you have a utility meter like this on the side of your house, we are looking for 200 qualified homeowners to go solar for no money out of pocket. It costs nothing to install the panels, and you can immediately get it.
All right.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with universal design for learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
I just love that analogy. I mean, it really is.
It's so true.
Yes, it is so very true. It's, again, is thinking of universal design, just the concept of having access to a building helps so many people. As the evolution of universal design goes to universal design for learning, it again creates more options or actions so that people can participate in a much more in-depth and richer way. I really appreciate her. I mean, 1, I like her humor. And 2, she makes something that seems really complicated and she puts it in a very concrete, functional way. That's my learning. I can tell you if there's humor in it, I'm gonna read it.
And like real examples where it's not technical and
Yes, real example, not technical, I mean, and that's why, like I said, I kind of gravitate towards her. So universal design for learning, the based framework that educators use to systematically plan for and address learners' differences through the design and implementation of inclusive practices. That means upfront. We're not going to have, this is what we have, and we're going to somehow try and include these kids because we're not teaching to the 7-10 students, the 7-10 split. And if you think of that mindset, oh, I need to look for the 7-10 students, and that way I'm going to get all the students. UDL guidelines may be applied to I mean, any area, not only school, but for workplaces, for training of teachers. Even, sometimes we don't even tap into what they need to be good teachers. You know, there are some people that are incredible teachers. They have, you know, incredible students that follow, and yet there's again, a subsection of people that can't tap into that person. And we want to give the opportunity for that teacher to be able to broaden his or her enrichment of style of learning. So again, I am a fan of Shelley, so we're gonna go to Shelley again, because again, this is one of those ways that she just describes it so much.
The thing that's different about a Verbo vacation home, you always have the whole place to yourself. No stranger at the dinner table making things.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in about 5 minutes that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelley Moore, and today's episode is called Reducing the Barriers, Planning for All. Okay, everyone, today we're talking about something very important. Today we're talking about shifting a paradigm. Now, one thing that I'm not sure everybody realizes is that in our efforts to move towards more inclusion and equity in our schools is that one of the biggest barriers is the actual infrastructure of the existing educational model. You see, me, like many of us who work in education, we were taught how to support students through a special education lens. That is, a model where a plan is made for most students and then special support is offered to those students who don't have success in that original plan. This special support then seeks to figure out, well, what's wrong with the student in question, and then offers support in a way by offering adaptations and modifications so that they can fit into the first plan. But what if nobody fits into the plan? Because of how we were all taught to support students, as our classrooms have become more diverse, there's been this overwhelming feeling that inclusion is so much work because more and more students need this type of retrofit support in order to be successful. Okay, now listen, I have never met a teacher that can follow more than one plan. So a big question emerging here is, how do we make one plan for all learners from the start so that we can be effective and efficient and then not have to retrofit for all of the learners that don't fit? In order to do this, we need to shift how we think about and respond to students who are struggling. You see, special education evolved out of a medical model. So for example, like if you break your leg, you go to the doctor and then they fix you. And if they can't fix you, they send you to a specialist. We get medical attention when something is wrong. This is special education. It's designed to react to students when something is wrong. And as a result, our educational system has become so heavily reliant on processes that emphasize failure, expensive evaluations, and intervention systems that focus on the deficits in students. Well, something that we can learn from the disability community is that just because a person is struggling doesn't mean they're broken. People don't need to be fixed. So then how do we respond to students in a way that meets their needs without creating programs and following processes for only targets what's wrong? Well, I will tell you this. We need to move away from the medical model, that's for sure. So what can we do instead? Well, one alternative is to shift towards a social model. In a social model, if someone isn't having success, it's not because they have a disability or because something's wrong with them as an individual, but instead it's because there's something around them in the context that's limiting their success. Now listen, I spend a lot of time traveling, mostly throughout North America, but about 2 years ago I had the opportunity to speak at a conference in Hong Kong. Now I was so excited about this. I've never been to Hong Kong, so my wife and I, we packed our bags and we were ready to go on our great Hong Kong adventure. Well, I was so excited that I didn't really anticipate that I would have different needs in Hong Kong than I do in North America. Typically, I would feel pretty independent in my travels. I would rent a car, I would drive, no problem. I would be able to navigate conversations and menus and directions and be able to find the conference hall that I'm presenting in, easy peasy. But in Hong Kong, I realized I needed much more support to be able to do these very similar things. Like I wasn't able to rent a car, I didn't have the right driver's license. I wasn't able to have many conversations, read menus, or follow directions because there was a language barrier. I also had no idea where I was speaking because I couldn't read any of the conference signs. I needed a lot of support in Hong Kong. Thank goodness the organization who brought me there anticipated this and made 3 Hong Kong EAs available to me if I needed them. I had a driver, I had a translator, I had a host, but I couldn't help think to myself, like, that's so many resources for one person. What's important to know about this example is that whether I'm in North America or whether I'm in Hong Kong, I'm still the same person. My success and independence in Hong Kong had very little to do with me as an individual and had more to do with the barriers that existed around me. Now, I want you to imagine all the students that you work with, every teacher they interact with, every classroom and school they go to. I want you to think about all these different contexts as possible different countries. Students are the same regardless of where they go. What changes is the context around them, and every context is going to have more or less barriers that can either support or limit success. So how do we support kids this way? Well, first of all, we have to anticipate these barriers, which means we can't wait for students to not be successful. We can't wait for them to fail. Second, we have to stop putting all of our resources into trying to fix individuals. If we move away from this kind of student diagnosis and intervention as the first strategy, it allows us to assess the environment and the context first to find out what's getting in the way. Because the big idea here is this, my friends. The more we support a context to reduce barriers, the less individual resources a person will need to be successful. The social model of support is a foundational understanding to planning for all students and directly connects to universal design for learning, response to instruction, and collaborative models of support. It would be very difficult to try and implement any of these frameworks if we were only looking at students through a medical and deficit-based perspective. Students are not broken. They may need support, but today's challenge is asking, instead, look around a student to see how can we fix the context so that barriers are reduced instead of looking at what we can do to fix a student in their deficit area. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of 5 More Minutes. Make sure you take a look at the 5 More Minutes podcast where we dig deeper into some of these big ideas. Give us
a look.
So she's a graduate student?
Yes. Well, actually, she has her PhD now.
Okay.
Yeah, this was
Or doctoral student, I guess, or doctor.
Yeah, this was her doctoral
Oh,
work.
amazing.
That
Wow.
was her that's
Oh, right. And the change she's gonna make.
Oh my gosh, it's just
Wow.
phenomenal. I mean, when people say, well, I can't make a difference. Well, look at the big difference she has made.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, it will have a domino effect, just as everything else in really the evolution of education. And even the thought of, I remember, I'll just let you know how old I am. My son was born in 1983.
Yeah, we're almost the same.
Really, nice.
1980.
1980. So he was born in 1983. The right for a student with a disability to even enter into school didn't happen until 1975. And even and that was under, the Americans with Disability Act, that it wasn't until 1991 that even the rollout of IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, was implemented. So this has been, when you think back though, that's been 50 years. But there's making progress, but again, it becomes to a paradigm shift. And I think Malia, you had said that this is gonna knock educational systems on its axis.
Because wouldn't it eliminate the need for self-contained classrooms?
That's the idea. And the idea is going into co-teaching. You're not gonna have just one teacher that's gonna be able to do it all.
Right.
But if you have co-teaching, if you have the opportunity to be able to, you have an instructor that's able, then I have another instructor that is they're able to be able to check in, to do team teaching, to do, a variety of ways to, that we're getting the intent of the curriculum and we're meeting mastery. So.
Well, and then because I'm sure there would be parent support in the classroom too, so it would probably reduce the cost of education.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And if you want to look at it that way.
Well, I mean, that's how
most
the district that
yes.
I am familiar with frames everything is
Yes.
in budget.
Exactly.
Budget.
Well,
And
that is what their legislation does that as well, but that's why, moving towards this paradigm, It's not gonna, it's like turning the Titanic. It's not gonna happen overnight.
No.
It's gonna take some time. But it also is by, giving information, especially to, people that can make a difference in the community. Where you're at right now, you can influence other folks to say, consider universal design for learning. And if you're going to IEP meetings, it's like, have we discovered and looked at the universal design for learning so that we could have the student included into a general education class, meaning that the teacher has to take the social responsibility of instructing the student rather than the student having to retrofit into a box that the person's not going to fit into.
I have triplets and I have right now 2 are at one school and one's in a different school because of,
Right. My kids, that was the
that's
same
not
way.
okay.
Matter of fact, I remember talking at a legislative reception, this is many years ago, and saying at the same high school, well, actually, it was through my children's, their whole elementary and middle school, they were completely separate, never in the same school. And high school, then they came together. But when my daughter went into her class, all her classes, she had a teacher, there was a curriculum, her AP classes, there was so much diverse learning opportunities. And then you walked into my son's classroom, which was only a few doors down, they didn't even have a teacher yet,
Hey, that sounds familiar.
right? And it was like, the disproportion is great. And just was like, this whole thing was saying, it's having segregation or having, people excluded doesn't mean that they're learning. Matter of fact, I had to fight for my son to learn to read. And that's his favorite thing to do, is read. And that didn't happen until he was 16 years old.
Well, and there's also another layer because you have the highly capable, the general education, and then you have the special education. And it's
Yeah. Well, that's what she said, the
difference
7-10
highly
split.
capable and
We
the
teach,
resources given to both.
they teach to the medium. Yes,
So my daughter is in a highly capable excluded classroom.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of, with just those, but they have, and then she gets pulled out for speech.
right.
So would UDL have opportunities for
Yes.
push in?
Yes. I mean, that's the
Because
whole
she
mindset is
cries
having,
when she goes to that, she doesn't want to be out of class.
yeah. I mean, can you, that also holds a huge stigma. I
Right.
mean, being pulled out,
She says there's nothing wrong with me.
there isn't anything wrong with her.
Right?
Compared to what the medical model, yes. Compared to the social model, no. And that's where it is, how do we help people who are either need a huge amount of challenge, like your daughter, she needs to be challenged, she needs to have all that, but that needs to be embedded within the general population as well as somebody who has an intellectual disability. How are you going to create and stop missing that 7-10 split?
Right.
Because it is, when we go up go to the side, we're going to hit more pins, more students than it is just teaching to the middle. Because it's going to benefit everybody.
And it eliminates the stigmas these kids have to face daily.
It does. It does. And matter of fact, it will lose, I feel, it will lose that school district mentality of students and them, those and them. It's just like, well, that's a special ed kid, we don't have to pay, much attention. It's like, no, this becomes, and that's why OSPI is going from the top down in administration and looking at building principles, is this needs to be a culture that all students are ours.
Because they have to have the top level buy-in before
That's
before
exactly
anything
it.
works.
That's exactly it.
I
So,
have another question.
Yes,
So are they teaching UDL in classes to teachers now? Because
yes.
they are. So
Not
I'm
in Kitsap
looking-
County right now, but
So my husband's taking Western Governors.
nice.
Going to WGU for his teaching certificate.
Mhm.
And I
Nice.
hope that that's part of his curriculum.
Well, I don't know if he'll get it for his certificate, but he certainly will when he goes into a school as
And
part
what's
of.
that? Or
Well, hopefully,
hopefully.
I mean, it will be evolving in Kitsap as it is in other school districts. Matter of fact, if you go onto OSPI's website, it's going to show you where there are pilot schools. and pilot districts.
Okay.
So have a look at that.
I'll put it in the links in the,
Perfect.
yeah.
So Malia's going to put that that link into the chat box so that people can look at where our districts, where our schools that are piloting, because there's some elementary, there's some middle school, there are some high schools. So have a look.
Is it inclusionary practices, professional
Yes.
development project?
Yes.
I know that Central Kitsap is gonna do a school board study session on that,
Nice.
and I hope to join them.
Good.
All right.
So like I said, it is infiltrating, and this is a good thing. So you can't do universal design for learning without co-design. And what does that mean? Well, because there are going to be opportunities where you have students that we're going to teach to the broader amount of students, but there's still going to be folks that still need maybe some scaffolded instruction, who may need assistive technology, who may need differentiation of instruction. But it offers alternative ways to receive information, gather feedback, and optimize the delivery of instruction and self-directed choices. So, like you said for your daughter, having her read Harry Potter, she's reading. She's not reading The Old Man and the Sea, but she's reading. And that's what you want to assess a person on, is what their interest, what they really want and want to focus on. Instead of saying, no, you have to read Old Man and the Sea, because we're gonna base you on everybody else in my assessment, versus what is it that interests you? How can I measure your competency with this? And then we can have an outcome. So like I said, it is changing how we instruct on its axis. So the alternate ways of receiving information, like using visual supports. Visual supports for some people can be, something similar to this, or it could be something that's tangible in front of them. It could be something that is object that they are able to use. Visual supports has an array of opportunities. And then there's verbal and audio supports, that we have people have the ability to, because I can tell you, one place that I did not have good reading comprehension was in a classroom. I don't care. I mean, it was just too quiet. I needed to, I needed a place where I could relax and do this. Well, in some classes that provide UDL, they're offering opportunities for students to sit in their beanbag chair, to be able to, put their hood up and be able to read their book. It is, what is it that we can tap into? And again, assessing what is the environmental barrier, that if you're supposed to sit at your desk, which can be uncomfortable, and to read the next 3 chapters while you still hear people milling around and you have fluorescent lights over the top of you, your comprehension is not going to be at where it should be. So, and then there's manipulative supports. Again, that kind of goes to the visual supports as well, but manipulatives and things that are going to help a person really tap into what their interests are. And like I said, this is a broad brushstroke of what it is. And what we talked about at the very beginning, there are the 3 phases of the neuroscience that says the engagement, the representation, and action and expression. Interesting, I have a young man that I'm working with in a school district. The thing that he loves to do the most, his favorite class is choir. He loves to sing. And yet he is not doing well in his other classes. And it's because he doesn't like to sit and read. He doesn't like, but when I suggested, have you ever thought of him writing lyrics and singing it to you? And that was like, what? I mean, that was just such a foreign concept. And it's like, but that's tapping into somebody's strength. You want to, that is, how are we going to have an action and an expression? It's by giving that person a diverse opportunity to say, yes, I have learned that. And that's how data is collected. So it is, like I said, this is all based on neuroscience. This isn't Monica saying this is a woo-woo kind of thing. It is providing opportunities for learners to have an action where they're able to express their knowledge through this process of engagement, representation, and action and expression. I was like, what?
I never understood why it was like a student had to conform to the learning, because that's, so we're asking a small child
Yes,
to do what we won't do.
right.
But
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. And, you know, the other thing that universal design for learning does, as we get into this a little bit further, you're just kind of jumping right ahead, you there. Anyway, looking at
Sorry.
providing choices and options for folks, because of how they're going to be able to, it's going to be, how are you going to show me that you have mastery of this? And give us student options. This is how you can do it, or present me with something. What this does is actually provide an opportunity for critical thinking and executive function that is going to benefit the student in the long run, and not because they were compliant and followed, you know, exactly what everybody is supposed to do, and they were just an average C student when they, given another opportunity, excelled at another way of expressing themselves. You know, optimizing the relevant and delivery of instruction. It's even when the content is relevant to the learner, the static format sometimes can be that barrier. And then such as those with processing delays or disability affecting attention and focus will have difficulty concentrating. How do we give them the opportunity? And that's what oftentimes are why we have students that are eliminated from classes, is because, well, they don't process the language as quickly, they don't, et cetera, et cetera. No, what do we do to make sure that this person is able to gather that information and the content that is needed so that they can be part of this class? Other learners, such as those with language-centered disabilities or hearing difficulties, will need to take additional steps, such as requesting and using accommodations just to access information. And let me tell you, how many students are going to say, and which this is one of the reasons why there are a lot of school dropout, is kids don't want to say, hey, I'm broken, could you fix me? And if we have a way of saying, tell me how I can be, how you learn, how and where we can tap into your strengths, that's going to change, again, another dynamic that, you know, trying to keep kids in school, it's going to change, I believe.
My nephew that just was recently diagnosed with autism, before he was diagnosed, he went to his mom and he said, what's wrong with me? And that's sad, because that's how the school made it feel.
Yes. So, and this is going right back to what you said, is optimizing individual choice and autonomy. You know, embedded within universal design is the choice and autonomy whenever possible, giving kids the choice. How are you going to show me that you have learned this? How are you going to do this? And it's providing options to the learner for how they demonstrate what they've learned. So before it was like through an assessment, or, you know, that you have to have a test and I'll measure that. Standardized testing. That through the opportunity to reinforce confidence in performing a task supports positive interpretations of their own agency or their own interests, and increases motivation and persistence when challenges arrive, such as doing their own TED Talk, you know, just being able to express themselves, or make a cartoon, a movie. Do you know how, I mean, this is all accessible just on, kids do this all the time.
Imagine the creativity.
The
What's gonna come out
creativity
of
is
it?
endless.
Yeah.
Build model of an invention that could positively impact this issue, or create a poster that uses visuals, pictures, charts, graphs to help people understand the problem and your solution. Design an informative slideshow to teach people about the issue, or write a children's book that you have to raise awareness to a child that is, you know, in first grade and you're an 8th grader. You know, it's kind of like that same attitude of, you know, having 8th graders being able to support, you know, elementary readers. It really is, how do we help people present information that is motivating and creative to their heart. You know, I'm looking at this, there are sometimes where I like visuals and I like charts and graphs, but for the most part, I would say I'm kind of graphically designing. I mean, I like graphics, but I like color. I like, well, obviously humor. I like, you know, things that how I am able to express myself is going to be much different than, say, somebody else who's doing this training. Optimize access to accessible tools and assistive technologies. There are a lot of schools right now, and there are some good reasons why, but oftentimes students don't have access to internet. And they don't have access to perhaps a YouTube. There has to be opportunities that, you know, obviously to put parameters around things that we don't have children that are being, you know, exploited in ways, but we don't want to cut off our foot in spite of ourselves. How do we give children these options and opportunities to learn? And the idea is not waiting for that student to fail, to then go, oh, I think maybe you need remediation. We're going to bring in a reading specialist to help you with this, or you're going to have to be pulled out for this. It's not that the student is broken, and we shouldn't wait for the student to have to fail before we recognize they need help.
Because it's not the students that fail, it's the system.
It is the system of education that is failing the student at this time. And I don't want to throw all my education teacher friends under the bus, because I know a lot of teachers that I've worked with for years have this incredible heart that really want to see achievement for our students, and yet I do know others that do not.
And I feel like a lot of it is the support that they don't have the support.
No, you're right. Teachers don't have the
They don't
support.
have the
The
resources
classrooms
and
don't.
support to be able to help every
No.
child.
And this shouldn't be the responsibility of that teacher to make sure that we have all assistive technologies in my school or in my classroom.
And they should have to pay for it out of their own pocket.
And that's what I mean, yeah, or pay for it out of their own pocket. No, this, like you said, it's a paradigm shift. It's also rearranging resources so that we are putting things in places rather than building a brick and mortar. Well, we have pull-out students that go to the mobiles that they're in the classroom, and we bring that to them. It's funny, not funny, but I just did a training yesterday on universal design and access to healthcare. And because of the pandemic, there are more opportunities for people who could not get to a doctor and their healthcare was failing. And the barriers to it was just one, transportation. Two is just their scheduling didn't meet their schedules. Or if they tried to schedule, they got on a phone that said, you know, it was an automation that please press 2 if you're blah, blah, blah. And their ability to process that is beyond them, so they don't get care. And so what clinics have said, well, if they can't, you know, I can't serve them if they're not going to come into the clinic. They can't be served because access is not accessible. Their building and their care is not accessible. So think of that as of just that. How do I get help? Just access. We have to start addressing those things. And now having, you know, we have telemed. You know, I can talk with a doctor. I can talk to a nutritionist. I can talk to anybody that I want on my phone.
And you don't have to take like half of the day off work to go.
That's it.
At any time of night, because
Anytime,
4
night or day.
a.m. on a Sunday, right?
Exactly. Because I don't know about you, because my kids always got sick Friday night about 10.
Yeah.
Oh, mine always get sick Sunday night about midnight.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
yeah, same thing. So, you know, the means of incorporating universal accessible tools and not out of the teacher's pocket whenever possible, and for assistive technology where barriers persist. When a UDL supports are coupled with accessible technologies such as text-to-speech software, media-rich experiences, or flexible technology-based assessment systems, the approach affords greater support for both the teaching and learning. Because, you know, that's what the other thing is, teachers don't want children to fail. But they do need more tools, and they do need more support in the classroom. And I know that there are a lot of teachers that are going, are you kidding me? We're gonna have an inundation of all these kids with special needs into my classroom, and now that I have a classroom of 25, it's gonna maybe grow, how am I gonna do this? Well, again, this is just tipping the paradigm on its axis, and it's gonna be an opportunity to change, and that teachers, they need to be supported, and supported all the way from the OSPI to their building superintendent, their school district superintendent, to their building principal, to their supervisor. They all need to be supported. That can become the barrier to that classroom, is because we don't have a teacher that is accessible because there are lack of resources. Technology does not need to be designed from the ground up to be accessible to all circumstances. Like I said, using texting is something that we use on a continual basis. Most, like Google and Firefox and what's one that Mac uses? Oh, no, I haven't. Safari. They all have options for text to speech. And so it's finding some of those things that, people need more access to. Smartphones and tablets are being used in schools for students with autism and for people with intellectual disabilities to help provide structure for their school day. For example, in a situation where an individual may have many tasks in a given day, a digital schedule can help them alert when a particular task begins, and included step-by-step guidance on how to complete it. Because, I don't know how many students I've worked with in school classrooms where the teacher might have the list of what they're supposed to do on the board, and yet they need more detailed information, and they need it in front of them, and they need a way to check it off. That it's not just a one size fits all. This is changing, again, the idea that one size fits all. You have to accommodate, you have to fix yourself so that you can go into this box. And we're just tipping over the box's edges and saying, we're gonna increase the opportunity for many. So optimizing access to accessible tools and assistive technology. Let's watch this video. Or not.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna have to get out of,
I think I am. Sorry. No, I don't want to stop screen sharing. Oh,
Yeah, I don't want to be that big.
Nice. Well, hi Shelley, where you are. No, because time is going fast, I will, I'm going to skip over that video, but.
they're gonna get the document, they're gonna get this document in their email,
Yes,
and so they'll have the link then.
correct. So accounting for learner perspective and content. What we do know is an emerging tenet to universal design for learning is that design of instruction should consider the perspective of the learner and the context in which they learn. I just, just let that sink in. It's like, what? That we need to look at the perspective from the learner and the context in which they learn. Emphasize the importance of incorporating co-instruction process in the development phase, one in which instructors and learners develop training tools and content together. And that could be, it's interesting because I've, again, working with a lot of students with autism. That has been my focus for many years, to how do I help this student with autism and an intellectual disability have access to general education. And we had to write out this incredible plan on how to do each and every step. And that general ed teacher didn't even look at it. Or we had a positive behavior support plan that says this person needs X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, that's not my business. It's like, no, that is a positive behavior support information plan. Who are the supports? Who are the educators? It's going to be the teacher. And right now we are leaving a lot of instruction happening with our paraeducators that don't necessarily have the master's level instruction skills to be able to support a student in a general education classroom. If you have co-teaching, if you have an opportunity where you have a general ed teacher, that we have all been there together and learned and developed an instructional process for the class for, all students, rather than just having, we have a teacher, we have a student that comes in just sort of like that inclusionary. Is it really inclusive, or is it just I have access? And what happens is I often see you've got a teacher, you've got the regular ed students, and then you got a para ed with maybe 2 students with a disability. And it just so happened that that was a teacher who had a great heart, who said, of course, a student with a disability can be in my classroom.
Should have a choice.
It shouldn't be a choice. I mean, that's where it comes down to the idea or the mindset of, that's where the civil rights of talking about Americans with Disability Act is access needs to be based on a person's disability, not an exclusion. So this is where universal design for learning is moving that. This is something that, like I said, I'm very excited about. I know there are going to be some people that roll their eyes as like, well, we'll see if this happens. But I think if people start opening their mind and have the idea of how do I make this an inclusive school? And that has to come from the principal's point of view. And it can't be an us and them. And again, that just is, how do we help teachers become proficient at what they do, creative at what they do, have accessible opportunities to teach our students based on their style of learning, their needs to be able to learn. So we call it universal design for learning is addressing barriers to learning on the front end. Just tapped into universal design for learning, and positive behavior intervention supports are the dynamic dual. Because I'll have people say, really, a person with with behavior challenges, are you kidding me that they're going to be in the same classroom as, as my students? Yes, because reality is when students exit school, that becomes community. That's when we have people that come together. What we're teaching students when we exclude others is that they don't belong. They don't belong to this community. They're outcasts, they're X, Y, and Z. And it's because from the onset of their first community, which is their school, second only to their family core, that they were excluded. So what we need when positive behavior intervention supports include high quality instruction based on what we talked about earlier. What does a student want to learn? How do they want to learn it? A comprehensive school or district-wide system of teaching and supporting behavior. That means the building, everyone is taking a role in that student's achievement. It's not, well, he's the SBD class, he's the EBD classroom teacher, that's his problem. He's got to come and, get this kid. No, just going back to what Shelley said, there's a barrier to learning. What is it? What is it that, it does? And, it's interesting just driving around my community the other day. I was looking at all the what do you call them? It left me. Alternative schools. There's the arts and music school. There is the STEM school. There are all these different things, brick and mortar, that create opportunity for exclusion for some folks. And then they have this one school that is just for kids with emotional behavior disorders. And a lot of kids with autism go into that one. It's like, no, good golly, we have to understand what are the barriers. And not look at them as if they are wrong, that they need to be fixed so that they can join society. It's a, like I said, it's a comprehensive school or district-wide system of teaching and supporting behavior. It addresses the environment for learning. What is the barrier to it? It differentiates instruction for all learners, including students with disability. It monitors progress. How is this person doing? And not waiting until they fail and saying, well, you failed. You know what, you just need to study harder. You need to have more focused. Well, what is going to help this person become more focused? Another young man that I'm working with, he has, and he's in his early 30s, and he has cerebral palsy, very limited range of motion, and he communicates through an eye gaze voice output communication device as one of his modes of communication. Working with the job coach in this case, he really wanted this young man to use his voice, his eye gaze voice output more effectively and more often. Just by sitting there and watching him do that and looking, it is horribly tiresome. I mean, incredibly tiresome. I mean, it's been set up very effectively. So he is a greeter, but he is trying to do this, and he uses his eyes and he's got to focus. And then sometimes he has to go over and recalibrate the eye gaze. So he's doing all of this while he's trying to communicate. And then we have a job coach who's going, he's not doing that. It's like, wow, what is it that we need for this person to be successful? And it's not that he needs to use that level of engagement all the time, that he has different levels of communication. He's got his eye gaze. He also has his moments developed. It is still an eye gaze, but she can point to something. She has rows. Is it in this row? Is it in this row? So that he can say, he uses his eyes and he'll blink yes. And then she goes over, is this or this? All right. So there's like 4 options. It's just 4 and 4. So 16 basically. He's like, well, that's just a lot of work. Just imagine what this guy is going through. The interesting thing
And
is,
imagine how that makes him feel when he hears that.
exactly. I mean, he's sitting right there, but you can say, so let's say his name is Tim. Hey, Tim. What's his favorite team? Football. I mean, I can't remember his, let's say the Detroit Lions. So tell me about the Detroit Lions. He's just like the little, he's funny. He's just like going all over the place, and he is showing you exactly, this was the last score. He went to ESPN. He found, it's pretty incredible. I mean, he can go in using his eye gaze. So he, again, looking at the support, his mom had to stand over him all the time. It does become very exhausting because he needs to be suctioned about every 15 minutes. He needs to be repositioned. And so, she had to do everything. Now it's like he looks at something that says, it voice outputs, Alexa, turn on the lights. And the lights come on for him. Alexa, turn on the TV. And then it's on his screen, and he can look around and he can find where his favorite team is playing. Does this guy sound like he has difficulty with accessing different things in his life? He's got some barriers, but he's got, when it is motivating for him, he is on it. So it's like, one of the things that I was thinking of, where he is right now as a greeter, I don't think is really up his alley. If he were to
Like
be,
he likes it.
no, if he were at, let's say, a sports bar, I think he would do even as a greeter. It's just like, if it is, you know, welcome, this game is on, you know, this channel, this game is on this channel, you know, he would be so incredibly involved, and that's where I'm kind of looking at customizing a job for him, because we are taking what is just a motivating opportunity for him, that he will do everything he can to get the details, the stats. You know, when he was considered more of a person with an intellectual disability, once he got tapped into technology, it's like, holy cow, this guy is incredible.
What about something like hosting sports trivia?
Oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly,
That just popped in my brain. I was like, oh, because they do that all the time in those kinds of places.
right. Oh, wouldn't that be, yeah, it would be fun for him. Actually, it would be fun for mom and dad too. We'd probably go there. I mean, and the thing is with this family, they have never thought of not taking him to any place that they ever went to. Of course, they had to do whatever they could to make sure that he had access, and they called ahead and made sure these things are in place. And thank goodness for universal design, so access to building is more open to them. But you know, right now we've got, you know, Alexa, we've got Siri, we've got all these people that we could ask help for that before we couldn't, and now we have a voice output that can help a person get to what they need as well. Technology is going to really advance people's ability to be in classrooms, or I mean, just to learn so much more. Like I said, just watching my son go from, you know, somebody who has, you know, an intellectual disability that has, although he has poor handwriting, he has figured out that when he puts in a few letters of the word, that it will self-populate.
Predictive text.
And then he'll go, oh, and then he will tap into it. It's like, so does he need to learn to write? I mean, that's why some of the reasons why they're, you know, they're not teaching cursive writing is because people are typing.
How do people learn how to sign their names?
I'm sorry.
How do people learn how to sign their names?
How do they learn to play their names? I know, actually, I was talking to I have a granddaughter whose name is Malia, and she's like, oh, they're teaching us how to write our names. I was like, I said, but you can't read, she can't read cursive. And it's like, wow, that is pretty incredible. But you know what? That's an evolution. That's the reason why we used cursive writing, was because children who had slates, that they didn't have to keep picking up their chalk, because, and so this way they could just fluidly write and then they could wipe it off. So that's.
And now we have digital signatures, so it's not.
Yeah,
We sold our house, we did it all online.
well, now it's just eye gaze. I mean, my passwords, I set them in, and then all I have to do is look at it, and then I got the face recognition when I go in. Things are gonna change. And this is where I see, you know, where the evolution is, that education needs to change, because sort of, again, what I had said is that, you know, Einstein said, don't memorize what you can reference or resource. Which, you know, we have resources really at our fingertips. I mean, I can't even imagine leaving my house now without my phone. I would feel like I was naked.
Watching.
I know, that's right. It's like, this is something I need to be connected. I mean, it keeps you connected with folks. So it's just looking at, again, at things in a different way, in a different format, and addressing the barriers that are really compromising our students' ability to access regular curriculum. Let's hear from Shelley again. Let's see if this will do it. Dang, damn it. Oh, this is gonna make me really irritate me.
Let me copy and paste that link.
I wonder if it was because I didn't. So that's why. That's why. Doggone it. All right, here we go.
If you have a utility meter like this on the side of your house, then I have some big news. In August of 2020,
Welcome to 5 More Minutes.
Share my screen, so you've got Shelley again.
useful videos in about 5 minutes that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelly Moore. Today's episode is called Dr. Baked Potato. Okay, so this story is going to start out a little weird, but just stay with me, okay? You see, there's something that not a lot of people know about me. Like, I have this passion. Like, it keeps me up at night. I just love baked potatoes. I mean, I really love them. They're so delicious. I research recipes. I've perfected the double bake. I love all the toppings and how they work together to create the most wonderful flavor explosion in my mouth. I love baked potatoes so much. I actually went back to school to learn more about them, and I wanted to learn all I could. So I entered a PhD program in baked potatoes so that I could become Dr. Baked Potato. I told you, it's weird. Just stay with me. Okay, so now I'm this baked potato expert, and now I need to find a job. And I'm so lucky because I find out that this great high school down the road is looking for someone exactly like me. They need a teacher of baked potatoes. I'm so excited. Like, what are the odds? So I have my interview and I get the job. Yes. I get into my classroom and I spend the whole week before school starts getting it ready. I put up baked potato posters. I have a timeline of the history of baked potatoes and their influence around the world. These students are so lucky. And then it's the night before school. I'm getting the last minute details ready. I have 25 baked potatoes all lined up. Okay, let's be a little bit more realistic. I have 35 baked potatoes all lined up. I have timed it so when the students walk in, the potatoes are coming hot out of the oven. I have the toppings measured out. Everyone has the same amount of bacon bits and chives, and the morning arrives. I am ready. And in they come, these lovely students, and I serve every single one of them their individually perfected baked potato with perfectly proportioned toppings. You're welcome, I say. This is for you, I say. I hope that one day you are as passionate about this potato as me. And then I step back and I enjoy my masterpiece. And then I look to my left. One of my students isn't eating. Why aren't you eating? This is a work of art. What is wrong? And you know what they say to me? I don't eat meat. He doesn't eat meat. What do you mean you don't eat meat? Just excuse me. Hi, yeah, Dr. Baked Potato here. Yeah, so I have a student who doesn't eat meat in my class. So, do you have any, like, bacon bit EAs who can come down and, like, pick the bacon bits? No, I can't, I'm teaching. Well, just anyone then, they don't have to be a bacon bit specialist, just anyone will do. Okay, hurry. They're coming, I say, just wait. And then I look to my right. Now there's an entire table of students who are eating. Why aren't you eating your potato, I say? You know what they said? We don't eat dairy today. They don't eat dairy today. You've got to be kidding me. Hold on, just excuse me. Hi, yeah, me again. Yeah. Okay, so now I have this gaggle. Can I just send them to you and you can help them take the butter off their potatoes? No, I can't, I'm teaching. What do you mean you're busy? What do you even do down there all day? End scene. First of all, our EAs have better things to do than pick off bacon bits from an already served baked potato. And second, do you know how hard it is to take melted butter off of a hot potato? This is what we're doing to our support teams. It is exhausting for everybody, and it isn't effective or efficient. And you know those kids who are waiting for their retrofit supports, you know what they're doing? They're throwing their potatoes at the people who are trying to eat. Okay, let's just back up the potato truck here for a second. As a teacher of baked potatoes, my expertise is still absolutely required to design the purpose or the goals for this group of potato eaters. But potato expertise isn't enough. To design for inclusive classrooms, there's a few things we need to do. Number one, we need to know who is eating the potatoes. Who are the students? What supports do they need? And we need to know this before we serve the potatoes, not after. Number 2, we need to know what the goal is. And we need to understand that goals are connected to concepts, not to activities. What this means is if the goal is to eat a baked potato, then yes, everyone needs to eat a potato. But the goal is not for all students to eat the exact same fully loaded baked potato with all the exact same toppings. Students are diverse. They're going to need different toppings. Number 3, planning for this range of diversity means that we anticipate the variety and complexity of toppings. And to ensure that everyone has the same opportunity and access, we teach all of the options to all of the students. This is called scaffolding complexity, and it's an additive model of making goals adjustable rather than relying on a reductive model of assumed average. And number 4, this one's hard because we have to let go. We need to hand over this choice of challenge to the students. We let them choose the toppings for their potato. And the best part, if we design this way, these decisions are based on what they can eat rather than on what they can't eat. No adaptations needed, no modifications needed, no retrofitting needed. And our support teachers and EAs, their roles will start to shift away from triage and towards supporting students to be in charge of their learning, helping them to decide what adjustments will be best for them. Okay, are you ready for your challenge? I want you to actually go make baked potatoes. Like, it can be for an event or for family dinner. Make sure that everyone has a potato and then offer the toppings as a bar of options. And then, the best part, sit back and watch. See the magic of inclusion unfold before your very eyes. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to the 5 More Minutes YouTube channel and look for us. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and don't forget, go enjoy your baked potatoes.
I mean, like I said, I can't say it any better. I mean, it just,
It makes sense.
yeah, and what we were just talking about, you know, like what you were just talking about, Malia, with your daughter, it's like, well, I can only get her to read this. All right, then let's measure reading comprehension on this. So the goal is that we're going to measure reading comprehension, but the topping is we're going to use Harry Potter to do that. So it becomes, rather than everything has to be institutionalized, you have to meet these goals. And it is like we're tapping into what interests you, what makes you, and I love this analogy. It's not how smart you are, it's how you are smart. And it's how do we tap in to what interests you in learning. The point is, one size does not fit all. Have any of you ever tried on a one size fit all and like, are you kidding me? Is this like, who's this gonna fit?
And plus size, one size never fits all.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And
I laugh, but I
yeah,
still
yeah,
no, not
Yeah.
so much.
exactly, because it doesn't. Or the potato analogy is like, everybody needs to learn and have reading comprehension, but you're gonna do it in different ways. The outcome and the measurement is gonna be that we can get that from what is creatively spiking your interest. So that's what I have for you today. It's about 15 minutes ahead of time.
And you thought you were running out of time.
I know, I really did. Well, and oftentimes I can tell you that I usually have a larger presence of people, and I usually end, yeah, there's lots of questions, though I appreciate your questions. Do you have any questions? And are there any questions from folks that are online?
I'll let them ask first because, yeah.
Let's see if anything in the chat yet.
I guess, one of the things I wanted to learn from those who are online, what was your biggest takeaway from this training? What was something that was like an aha? If you could write that in your chat, that would be awesome.
I'm curious how, so like, I understand like letting the because the child pick what interests them. How are they going to ensure that the kids don't fall through the cracks though? Like,
There is a process of measurement and it's called a rubric.
okay,
And that's how they measure and monitor and make sure that they're not falling through the cracks.
Okay.
And it's, like I said, it's not about waiting for that person to fail.
Right.
It's by measuring and not every 6 months or annually, but going, wow, this just didn't work. It's like we have, where are we now on this progression of a rubric?
Right.
What outcome do we have? Now do we need to reassess this so that we are giving more support so this person can be successful, or we need to give them more options? And basically, looking at the 3 neuroscience ideals of universal design for inclusion. There are processes and procedures. As a matter of fact, there are tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3 of universal design. So what I'm giving you is the concept, the philosophy, and the theory. When it comes, push comes to shove, there's a lot more detail to it that I'm giving you. If one, what is her name? Oh, if you're looking for really good, more in-depth information, and I'm gonna write this on the board, and if you could share it. Her name, it is Dr. Katie Novak. She has books, she's an incredible woman she is on fire for universal design for learning. She has been, she's been in the trenches, she has been a teacher, she knows how to talk with teachers, and she really talks about the implementation of universal design for learning through, the tiered system. I would really reach out to that. I just Googled universal design or UDL Katie Novak, and you'll see her website. I can't remember. I think it is Katie Novak, or it's Universal Design for Inclusion. One of those
So
two.
we have some things in the chat. Do
Oh,
you see it?
let me look. Well, and then Malia said, tailor the lessons towards the child's interests. Audrey says, all students will be successful if we can aim toward the outer edge of the ability. Exactly. Emily says, we really liked Shelley Moore in general. We also like the idea that all our kids will benefit from most of what we need to do, really support our special ed kid students. And then you would put Dr. Katie Novak has books on UDL. And you actually CAST, which is the other, if you were to type in
What do you have to say about following district provided curriculum and maintaining high expectations for all kids with UDL?
what do you have to say about following district provided curriculum and maintaining high expectations for all kids with UDL? Well, let's go back first and say, we are following district provided curriculum. And if you listen to Katie Novak, she's like, that's great. School districts, they go to they have curriculum that is reviewed, scientifically approved, and gone through the school district that is brought to the students. Again, if you think about a curriculum as being the potato that can be served, it's the different toppings. And maintaining the high expectations is through the process of assessment and the person's ability to express themselves. So this is, Emily, that's a great question, because before it goes into the classroom, the teacher needs to look at what do I need to have in place for all these students to be able to access this curriculum. It's still going to maintain the high expectations. It's still going to have, matter of fact, the neuroscience proves that there are better outcomes when curriculum is designed for the students that are going to be, that need to learn this curriculum. So again, just going back before it's presented to the students, and not just, again, the analogy that Shelley Moore says, I've got all my baked potatoes, I've got them all loaded with bacon bits and onion and sour cream and butter to find out there's only a small portion of them eat that. It was just, that was my way of eating. It is that same way of, you know, just the idea of how do I meet the district standards by instructing to meet all students rather than the middle, of which is what oftentimes is what school districts measure, you know, or measure their outcomes. And rather than just saying that we've excluded those who are either have more intellectual challenges in special education, or those who have a higher need of higher support, not higher supports, but more challenging curriculum. If we only are constantly measuring just on the medium, we aren't going to have high. Those are, I would say, and again, I would look towards Katie Novak, who really addresses this, because it's not about, we want to keep the high expectations, but the high expectations are only measured on the medium. It's not measured on all students. So that's why it is universal design for learning is going from the superintendent to principals to classroom teachers, that it is a top down, because this is going to be a way that curriculum is going to be designed in a different way to be presented to all students.
To follow up on that, because say like the district, the curriculum says they need to learn multiplication, for instance. But like, for instance, my son, who is technically 4th grade, he's not there.
Right.
He's still, you know, identifying numbers. How do they make that? Because then the curriculum wouldn't work for him.
So let's think, if he's not able to do that right now, we're just recognizing the numbers. What we might teach for him is using adaptations, because we all use calculators. If he's using a pen and paper, is that a barrier to his learning? Is there a way that we can teach him how to use a calculator to get the math concepts in place, rather than just doing numbers? It doesn't mean that he shouldn't learn his numbers. He needs to learn his numbers.
Because otherwise he can't even push on the calculator, he doesn't know what they are.
Right. But there are different ways to be able to teach that strategy as well. I'm not that person.
Right, no, I'm just trying to like wrap my head around it, because, you know, like having 3 kids that are at the same age and all different levels,
Yes.
I see it, like, I see the differences, and I would love for them to all, one day for them to all be in the same classroom would be amazing. They would absolutely love it. But I just like, I can't wrap my head around like how you would,
And like I said,
even though I push for full inclusion for
Yeah.
my special education son. Don't get it, but like, no, not at all.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, I'm just trying to figure out how it works. My brain isn't.
And that's where,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's interesting. Training that I did just recently, and this was learning, you know, about one of the supports within an inclusive environment, for say a person who has an intellectual disability, for the person to make, let's say, a cup of hot chocolate. You know, it's just like, all right, you know, this person is gonna make a cup of hot chocolate, and really they started out with just getting the cup, the milk, and, you know, chocolate syrup. And then somebody else does the rest for them. So it is figuring out what's the underlying concept. What is it that we need to teach to get that person to the next step? So what we have, I'll say, for instance, this young man he gets his cup, but sometimes they'll say, oh, you forgot the chocolate. So he needs like a template to put all of his tools out. Then the next step is, I need to pour my milk in. Oh, look, it goes all over every place. Oh, well, maybe we can do like Starbucks, and we can mark it to where it can be filled. And then he knows that concept is what full is. And then he can do each process. How does he know the concept of hot? And that's really what Shelley was talking about. We're teaching to concepts. We're not teaching to the curriculum standard. We want to teach the concepts to get mastery of curriculum standards. And each of them is, I mean, if you look up actually scaffolding of skills, UDL.
Yeah, I wrote that down, because I want to see what that is.
Yeah, it's that, like I said, is, to me, again, that was a really eye-opening. And I work with a lot of transition age students, so I don't work with elementary. So transition age students and people, adults in the community that are benefiting from universal design for learning. Because we're looking at their way of learning, we're tapping into things that they like to do and scaffolding skills. So the outcome, and when you think about backward planning, we're here and we want him to make his hot chocolate independently. How do we do that?
Right.
Do we just keep showing him again and again and again and again and again?
Even though it's not working.
Although, well, yeah, and he's just going through routine. Did he learn the concept of what is full? Did he learn the concept of that's too hot? Did he learn that how much chocolate do I put in that's just right? How do I actually do, work a microwave so that I can put my cup in there? How do I make sure that the cup that I'm putting in there isn't going to make my microwave explode? These are all underlying concepts that with scaffolding of instruction is going to get your son to the point where he has mastery, because we're identifying what those underlying concepts, and if we need to have assistive technology, if we need some sort of adaptation so this person can get to the next level, then that's the design. It's there. The design is there. Rather than we're going to keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and the person still can't do it independently.
Yeah.
It's again addressing the barriers so that person can get from one step to the next step.
And it stops putting them in I feel like it's kind of like they can't learn academics because like life skills and all that. I'm like, that's my job to teach him how to take care of him. Your job is to teach my child as much, as much as you get. Your academics, it's not your job to teach my child how to brush his hair. That's my job.
Right. Then, I mean, there's all, I'm thinking of, trying to, thinking of the way of functional academics, which really is in parts academic achievement by using functional activities, again, that are interesting to the individual. Like,
Oh, you have a new question.
oh, I got a minute, all right.
It's a question to you. I didn't know if you wanted to answer it, if you wanted to stay private.
1-to-1.
Oh, does your son,
Like,
oh, that's for you. Does your,
I know,
son
what does
count?
that mean?
Does he respond to one-to-one correspondence?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just,
I was like, wait, can you clarify what you're asking?
I'm a special ed teacher for elementary. So I was wondering if your son counts objects, like one object per number, if he's counting.
Yes, and it's getting better because of his new the teacher that he was moved into is
Oh, great.
more experienced, and the parent is better that he's with now. So it is progressive. I'm just, this is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that is because one great way to use universal design in classrooms, and you as a parent to advocate for your kid, is to make sure that manipulatives, handheld things are available to every student who might need them in order to count objects. So if they can see the numbers and someone can tell them what number that is, and then they count until they get to that number, then that can help engage them with what students are doing in the classroom. And another great way is if they can learn to use a place value chart while they're using the manipulatives, that can also give them and everyone else access to not just, because a lot of kids, especially in math, they can manipulate the numbers, but they still don't know what it means. And so being able to use a place value chart really is an example of that universal design, because they can, when they're using that place value chart, they're developing an understanding of what the numbers in their places within the digital system, what that means. And so that it really is something that could help everyone, your son and every other student in the class, to use those manipulatives as they're doing their math.
Audrey, why aren't you doing this training?
I came to take the training and I've enjoyed it, and I really did enjoy listening to Shelley as well. But yeah, it's I teach special ed, and so it's always good to get a refresher of things, you know, that I learned a decade ago when I did my master's, and also okay, yes, I do know how to apply this, so that's good.
That's awesome. And wouldn't that be awesome if you could co-teach with your general ed teacher? I think to be
Yeah, and we do, yeah.
That's actually why Audrey and I are here together. Sorry.
Where?
Okay. I teach third grade at the same school with Audrey, and we came to kind of refresh and get our skills going because we have some kiddos that we're trying to figure out how to serve best this year. But I wanted to speak up about multiplication, differentiating with that, because that's primarily taught in third grade. And so I have some experience with that at this point. And what I would say for working with focusing on UDL toward multiplication as the ultimate goal is to have objects and working with objects, physical manipulatives, whatever it is, erasers, Legos, cars, doesn't matter. And connect those number practices with equal groups of things. So if you have a kiddo who's struggling to recognize numbers, then put 12 objects out and put them in groups of 2 and count every single object, but count 1, 2 really loud, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you're drilling in or like practicing in the skip counting and the group counting and the concept that multiplication is equal groups added over and over again is being infused into that number practice that way.
You probably know his teacher if you're in South Kitsap. His teacher is Amy Baldwin.
Third grade struggle when they move away from concrete objects to the concept of multiplication laid out there.
Audrey, and I just wanted to put this out as an offer. Kitsap County is the project that I've been talking about that I'm doing through Thurston County, which is universal design, bridging to school to work, is we're looking for teachers from South Kitsap to participate. It's about a $1,700 opportunity for a teacher to go through this training. Do you know who Noelle is in special education, or Casey? I'm trying to remember. At any rate, if you're interested in getting a certificate through CAST, I can certainly help you get arrange that if you're interested.
Monica, so I'm going to CC you on the email that I'm writing with all of the links.
All right.
So when you get that, you can reply with that information.
That would be awesome. I will do that. Perfect.
Audrey, can you hear me?
All right, we're going to end this.
Yes, I can hear you.
My kids are in South Kitsap.
Oh, great.
Amy Baldwin is his teacher.
Who?
Amy Baldwin at Hidden Creek.
Okay, I don't know her.
She's been there for a while, but yeah, she's amazing. That he's doing a lot better this year.
Oh, good.
That's awesome. All right, it is 5 past. Thank you so much for participating. And if, like I said, if you have questions or more questions, my information, actually, I'll put my email here.
You're gonna get it on that email.
Yeah. And I also have my website, which is monicameyer.com, which also has right on the first, come to the homepage, it will talk about the Thurston County Universal Design for Learning project. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you for your time. This has been obviously, I'm pretty passionate.
You're amazing.
Pretty excited.
You're great at what you do.
Well, thank you. All righty. Have a great weekend. And
Thank you, you too.
All righty, take care.
Thank you for coming to the training. Tell your friends about the next one.